If you just finished a diet and you don't want to gain all the weight back that you just lost and have all your hard work be for nothing, then you better watch this video. This is exactly what you're going to do to prevent any of that from happening, to get back to maintenance, set yourself up for a great growing phase, and to enjoy the fruits of your labor and actually maintain the weight that you just lost. Otherwise, what the hell is the point? You feel me? Okay, shut up. Let's go. So, a good reverse diet and a good maintenance phase starts with a good deficit. If you do stupid shit during your deficit, like freaking starve yourself and do a bunch of unsustainable shit and set yourself up to binge afterwards, then you're going to do exactly that. So, go watch my previous videos. I've made probably at least 10 at this point on dieting, specifically my last one about yo-yo dieting. It talks about exactly that. The key to preventing yo-yo dieting is not being an idiot, like I just said. There's way too many things to talk about there. Go watch my last video on that. An hour-long video, extremely comprehensive. Literally everything you need to know about struggling with dieting and how to not set yourself up to be fucking look like this jackass right here. Binge out, ruin all your progress, end up yo-yoing. So go watch that. Now, this reverse diet period, this period, however long after you finish the cut, is the most crucial time period of your fucking life. Okay, seriously though. This is where almost everybody, including myself in the past, fucks up, ruins all their progress, ends up literally wasting, let's say they cut for 8 weeks pretty aggressively. Fucking hated their life for 8 weeks. And all that just to binge for 2 weeks straight and gain back every single pound that you lost. That's 10 weeks down the drain, right back to square one, maybe in an even worse place than you were before. Definitely in a worse place mentally. Like, you don't want that to happen, so you better take this shit seriously. This, unfortunately, is usually harder than the cut itself. Usually most people can get themselves to just suffer through the cut for however many weeks it ends up being, because you see the light at the end of the tunnel. You know, I only have to do this short term, then I get back to maintenance. Life's going to be all good and dandy, sunshines and rainbows. And that's unfortunately where a lot of people go wrong, and one of the biggest mistakes you need to avoid is expecting this period to be easy. Expecting you to get back to maintenance, you to start having more food, and oh man, everything's going to be awesome. It's going to be so good. Sorry, but this isn't to downplay that or make you like not excited or anything, but don't get cocky now is the point, because you will very quickly end up like my dumbass here if you don't do the things that I'm going to tell you to do. So take this shit seriously, because it is the most crucial time period. It's usually harder than the cut itself. This is a make or break period. You're going to see in a second. I'm going to talk about some specifics of why, but this shit is hard for a lot of people. And the theme of this video is going to be, don't let your hard work be for nothing. It's what I said in the beginning, I believe, in the little hook of this video. So, okay, let's go into how to actually do this shit though. Why don't we? So, in an ideal world, traditional reverse dieting, which if you're unfamiliar is where you add a certain amount of calories every week, every day. There's a couple different ways to do it. But essentially you incrementally add calories back rather than just getting back to maintenance. Now, there's some decent research on this. From what I've seen, it's mostly a wash. Like it's usually no difference between groups in terms of like the different approaches that they use. They usually measure like weight regain. It's usually, there's no statistical significance, at least from what I've seen. I'm sure you can find studies that show that it worked. Like anything, there's always going to be like at least a study that shows that this thing works, but there's probably multiple that show that it doesn't really work, it doesn't really matter. Now, with all that said, you don't really need research on this type of thing. You just have to understand physiology for one, and practicality. And I can tell you, let's think about this. What does reversing actually do physiologically other than just keep us in a prolonged deficit? Because that's the main thing it's going to do. Now, you could argue about like some metabolic adaptations and things like this, but those are largely going to be like, it's not even worth me discussing, to be honest. Yeah, I'm just going to leave it at that for now. If you want to claim that there's some special benefit, I'm sure there's some interesting theories. I know there is, but it's not even worth discussing in my opinion. Now, like I said, practically speaking, the main thing that's happening if you reverse dieting is you're just prolonging a deficit. You're therefore probably making it more likely that you're going to end up struggling afterwards because you've spent even more time in a deficit now. You spend more time in a state of low energy availability, whatever the fuck you want to say. Like, all the mental and physical negatives that come with that are probably setting you up to have problems post-diet. Now, some people may find that this approach works better for them, and all power to you. If that works for you, that's great. It just doesn't really make sense to me. But again, you can absolutely do it. But my preferred approach is to just get back to maintenance as soon as possible in an ideal world. Now, how do we actually do this, Nick? Because you can't just jump back to whatever you were eating before, whatever your previous maintenance was, because you just lost all this weight. You're a smaller human now, therefore your maintenance is probably lower, right? Yes, that's how that works, generally speaking. And it's a little bit more complicated because you also just dieted, and so there is a little bit of metabolic adaptation and things like this. Now, with all that said, practically speaking, it'll depend on how much weight you actually lost and how long you were in a deficit and how much of a deficit you were in, etc. So I think the best thing you can do is I would take advantage of AI. I think give it all the data you have, all the information you have, all of your weight logs from the entire cut, from before the cut when you were at maintenance, all your food logs, especially from before when you were at maintenance and during the cut itself. Hopefully it can get some great data showing like the trends in your body weight as in relation to your food, obviously, and they can use that to get an estimate of what your new maintenance might be. Give it like your activity levels, your steps, everything like that, your body weight. Those things alone can give you a pretty good estimate. Like, you can just go to a TDE calculator and those will give you a good estimate. But I would definitely leverage AI with the fact that you can put in your weight logs and everything to show it like the actual change. I think that would be beneficial. Now, it's probably going to give a similar estimate either way. It doesn't matter because this is just an estimate. And with that said, I think the smart thing to do is to just undershoot that by a couple, maybe like 100 or 200 calories, depending on the estimate it gives you, and like how well you know yourself, how experienced of a dieter you are. Like, I can usually tell kind of where my calories should be. Even after, like, if I lose a significant amount of weight, I can usually tell where I'm at, where I should be, etc., based on how much weight I'm losing towards the tail end of my cut, etc. So depending on how experienced and knowledgeable you are, this is just going to give you an estimate. And so the approach here is maybe undershoot that estimate by 100, 200 calories, maybe a little bit more if you're really cautious, if you're not too concerned with potentially staying in a deficit for a couple extra days. Undershoot it. Try to eat this amount for about a week. And something you need to be aware of is expect your weight to increase because you've increased food, right? That means, one, more food in our gut, so more weight there, and most importantly, more glycogen, more stored carbohydrate and water within our muscles, our liver, etc. Those are the main places it's going to be. And so that's going to add some weight to you. Could be a decent amount. And you could even go down the route of trying to calculate that based on the fact that like 1 gram of glycogen stores 3 grams of water with it. But I wouldn't even worry about any of that shit. I would literally just expect a couple pounds. Woo! Expect a couple pounds expect a couple pound increase. Some people may not even really notice much of an increase past like the first day. You might find that if like you've ever tried refeeds, usually the next day you'll be up a couple pounds, then you'll lose a couple pounds afterwards, which is like the whole purpose of refeeds kind of is to, we're not going to go down that route. I can make a separate video about that. But you might notice that, you probably will notice that it'll go up temporarily, might come back down a little bit. It's probably going to be a little bit higher than what it was, though, because like I said, you're going to be fuller now, which is a good thing. We want that. The best thing you can do here is to make sure you don't confuse this with fat gain. You don't freak out because you see, dude, I had this weight goal. I wanted to get to 160 this whole time during my cut. I finally got there. Now I'm 162. Fuck, man, I got to cut again. No, you jackass. You just have more glycogen. If you really cared about the numbers like that, which you shouldn't because it doesn't matter, then just plan ahead and cut down to 158 to account for that 2 pound refeed or weight gain, whatever. But yeah, and then from here, so how do you distinguish this weight gain from fat gain, and how do you know what your actual maintenance is? So I think the best approach here is let the scale kind of balance out over the coming days. I would give it like a week and by this point your weight should start to stabilize. And so from this point on, you can kind of infer based on the trends, not the fluctuations, because it's going to fluctuate regardless. Like if you're at maintenance, if you're in a deficit, whatever, it's going to fluctuate based on a million different things, by like a pound or two either way. So look at the trends, but if it is starting to trend downwards after a week or two of eating at this maintenance, or this estimated maintenance, this new calorie amount, because it wouldn't be maintenance if it's trending down, and that's the point here, then that means you are probably under eating a little bit, and you're probably still in a little bit of a deficit, which might be a good thing if you want to lose more fat. But like I said, you should probably have just got as lean as you wanted to in the first place, and now we get to increase food and we get to get back to maintenance. So from there, just increase food by like 100, 200 calories, depending on how much weight you were losing and how little you care about potentially gaining like 0.1 pounds of fat, because realistically it's not that deep if you do end up overeating a tiny bit. If you were to overshoot a little bit, because that can also happen, you might find that your weight starts to trend upwards even after the first couple weeks or so. It's trending upwards. That means you're eating a little bit too much. And so just pull back on calories a little bit. Find your true maintenance, which is always a moving target. It's never like a one specific amount every single day. But you also don't eat the exact same amount every single day, even if you think you do. There's always going to be human error, so it really doesn't matter. So all this shit is just estimates and averages, and just try to find your new maintenance. Like, it's really not that complicated. Hopefully I didn't complicate it too much. But find your maintenance. Get back to that shit as quickly as possible, ideally. If you want to do the classic reverse approach because it works for you to control your food and you want to get a little bit leaner, but you don't want to be in as much of a deficit, then there's some merit to that, sure. Then yeah, by all means, be my guest. Again, there's a million ways you can go about like how to actually structure that. But yeah, that's not what I wanted to talk about in this video. So fuck you. How about that? Huh? Yeah. Okay. So I don't know if I had it. Okay, yeah, I did have it here. So now with this food that you're now bringing back in, you would expect that I'm gonna finally stop being hungry, right? And I'm gonna finally start feeling better, right? Now you will probably feel better. You should feel better, like especially like those first few days of getting carbs back in your system. You're gonna feel like on top of the world, hopefully. But you might also notice that hunger and cravings are now even higher than they were before. And you're like, what the fuck? I'm eating more. Why am I even more hungry and more craving more shit? And I think it's largely psychological, because once you kind of introduce, like, whether it's new food or just more food in general, you start to introduce that shit to your brain and it just wants more. And obviously there's also the fact that your body's trying to fight you to gain back all the weight that you just lost and get you to binge, to do exactly that. So hunger's probably going to get driven up a little bit, and that's why I said this period can be harder than the cut itself. So you should be prepared for this. Be prepared for that first week post-diet. You're expecting it to be sunshines and rainbows. I can finally have that cheat meal. I can have that cheat day. Do not do that shit. I'll talk about that in a second. But then you realize, fuck, I'm even hungrier than I was before. What the fuck, man? You gotta just tough it out. For usually it'll last a couple days, maybe a couple weeks, but it'll usually level out eventually, and you will thank yourself if you just thug it out and you let yourself see the other side. But another huge thing here: do not introduce anything crazy. Don't go out to eat and have like this crazy cheat meal or cheat day, especially. Or let yourself go to the grocery store and get all the things that you were craving every single time you went shopping during your cut. You were fucking, what's the word I'm thinking of? I can't think of it, but you were looking at the bakery aisle, fucking salivating like crazy, creaming your pants at the thought of eating that shit. Don't let yourself get that shit, man. I wouldn't even get that shit at all, because that can send you down a bad rabbit hole, trust me. If you are prone to that type of thing, definitely don't do it then. Now you could argue putting those restrictions on yourself can make things worse. Sure, all depends on the person. I've seen it go both ways. But the key here is let yourself get back to a better state before you introduce any of that shit. So within the first we can say like 4 weeks on average, maybe. This is when you're most vulnerable, when your body is driving hunger up the most, cravings the most, when you are the most susceptible to binging, to rebounding, to storing fat. So we want to take this seriously. We want to be as safe as possible, and we don't want to introduce any of this shit. We want to eat the same foods that we are already eating, which are amazing, by the way. If you don't like whole foods like this, if you think this looks bad, you're fucking insane. This is incredible. Now, processed foods are even better, sure, but you don't need that shit. Be a man or something. No, I'm just kidding. But we're not introducing any of that shit because it's not worth the risk. You will think it's just one cookie. I'm just going to go have that one thing from the store. It's going to be all good. I thought the same thing. And then I struggled with binging and that consuming my life for pretty much a year. And so take my learn from my mistakes. Take what I'm saying seriously. Like, you don't want to go down that road, my friend. So just hold off on the treats. You can do it. You just did it for a whole diet. Hopefully it wasn't a super aggressive one where it really felt like that, and it was just kind of like it was sustainable, and it wasn't anything crazy. And now you're just doing the same things, all the same habits, except now you get a little bit more food. Like I said, ideally you won't be even having those things in your plan, but I'm also like sympathetic to the fact that, like, sure, having those things in moderation is cool, and I would generally promote that. It's just if you know that you are kind of on a slippery slope there, then just play it safe. But all that's to say, don't introduce anything crazy within the first couple weeks, especially the first couple days. Just introduce, like, if this was your one of your meals, like, just add more rice. Like, that would be a delicacy, dude. If you've ever cut before and you've had to drop carbs pretty low, usually like rice and like sourdough and those kind of carbs that are not really too nutrient dense, not really too filling, those are usually the first to go. And so you're probably eating like majority fruits, veggies, meats. That's probably like 90% of your diet. Getting to add in like a cup of rice to one of those meals, or like some extra potatoes or some extra sourdough or some extra cream of rice or anything like that, oh my gosh, it's so good. So just enjoy that shit. You don't need any of the crazy candy or anything like that. Just increase the quantity of the foods you were currently eating. And yeah, that's the main idea there. Now, huge thing here, I keep hinting at it, do not lose sight of your goals. Don't let all that hard work that you just put in, all that suffering you might have felt during the diet, which is a flaw in itself and is one of the main things that I talk about in my last video and in general with the successful diet, is it shouldn't feel like you're suffering. You shouldn't enter this mode where it's like tunnel vision, cut mode, suffer mode, like isolate myself from everybody, just tunnel vision. I just have to suffer through these next few weeks, then I'll be good. That's what gets you to fucking rebound. So ideally, you would have avoided that completely, but inevitably, you were still gonna have to deny yourself and have some discipline and struggle a little bit and face some challenges. Don't let all that be for nothing, man. Remember why you cut in the first place, why you wanted to get lean. Hopefully you actually got to the leanness that you wanted to, which is another very important thing that I actually want to touch on. Because I know for myself, and I've seen this time and time again, is that people just usually don't end up getting as lean as they want, but they end up kind of just giving up on the cut because it's just too brutal and they just can't take it anymore. They get demotivated, whatever it might be. In that case, take a maintenance break and then get back into a deficit when you're ready, which is a video for another time. But the point here is most people just don't let themselves get to the point that they actually like what they see in the mirror and they want to maintain it. They want to put that work in to not fucking let all that hard work be for nothing. They want to keep this physique. They're proud of it. And their standards are now raised. Most people just don't let themselves ever get there. And so, like I said, maybe you stopped the cut prematurely and now you're not really happy with the way you look. You look better than you did before, of course. You're a little bit more confident, but you're not quite there yet. And so that's when you start to negotiate with yourself. Like, I already don't really like the way I look. Maybe I'll cut again in a little bit. And that's when you start to get comfortable. You start to negotiate, and then everything goes downhill from there. So that's an important thing, is make sure you actually get to the point where you're happy. And if you don't, and you're really struggling towards the tail end of a cut, That's perfectly normal, by the way. Obviously, the leaner you get, the harder it's going to be to lose fat. Take a maintenance break for a couple weeks, a proper maintenance break, then go back into a cut, maybe do a final push for a couple weeks. Just make sure you get to a point where you're actually happy and your standards are now raised. That way, it's going to be much easier to want to maintain that shit. So yeah, that was kind of a random little side note tangent, but main idea here is don't lose sight of your goals, man. Remember why you wanted to cut in the first place. Don't let all that shit be for nothing. You might find that, like, this kind of goes back to what I was just saying, but you might find that, like, you got as lean as you wanted, but it just, like, you kind of feel like numb. Like, maybe it was cool for the first couple days, and you kind of lose sight of it. And you're kind of like, I mean, this is cool. But maybe you kind of attached your purpose with, like, losing that weight and how good you thought you would feel. This is usually not the case necessarily. Like, again, if you really get as lean as you want, you'll probably, like, fall in love with the way you look, especially if you've never been lean before. Like, usually it won't be like this, but I've seen this happen before, where it's like you kind of just become numb to it, and it's kind of like, I feel like I'm not really working towards anything anymore. And that's when you start to get comfortable and you start to negotiate, like I said, and everything goes downhill. So we want to prevent that. We got to keep our goals at the top of our mind. This is a concept I talk about all the time. The things that you think about will dictate your actions and your reality. So if you're constantly thinking about cheating on your diet and you're fantasizing about that shit, you're thinking about it at work and you're watching all this food content and everything like that, your actions are going to reflect that eventually. You're going to end up caving and wanting to do those things. Or at the very least, it's going to be a lot harder not to, right? So we need to be conscious of our thoughts. Realize when we start to think about those things, because inevitably you will. Those thoughts will come up. You have to hold those thoughts captive, though. Say, hold on, where's my focus at? Bring it back to your goals. Bring it back to having a six-pack, feeling great, looking great on the beach, whatever your goals are, whatever your motivations are. Have that be on the front of your mind as often as possible. The more you can think about that shit, the better off you're going to be. The more successful you're going to be. The more your actions are going to align with those goals. So your thoughts, where your thoughts are very important. I literally have at the top of my to-do list the words, where is your focus? I also have focus on the spirit, deny your flesh, which is a similar idea. Your body, your flesh is trying to get you to binge and gain all that weight back. And your flesh is weak, but your spirit is strong. Your spirit, which is, in this case, the version of yourself that you want to be, the goals that you're trying to get to, focus on those. The more you focus on those, the better off you're going to be. Now, I think that was the last actual picture on here, but there's a bunch of different tangents I can go down. Main one being, though, like, I kind of touched on it here, is during the cut, it's very easy to be motivated because you're getting that instant gratification. You're waking up, seeing a new low on the scale, or at least hoping to, and having that, like, anticipation, that excitement. You're working towards something. You have a strong sense of purpose, and you're looking leaner every day in the mirror. You're feeling better about yourself every day. Maybe you're getting more compliments, whatever. And then you get to maintenance, and you stop getting those quick results because a growing phase is much slower and much less quickly rewarding, if that's a way to put that. That was kind of stupid, but you're not getting that instant feedback anymore. And so a big thing you can do practically here, a lot of it again comes back to just being aware of these things and setting up your fat loss phase to set you up for a good maintenance phase. So not going aggressively is the biggest thing. Without going too into the weeds there, just don't go too aggressively. Make it sustainable. Focus on your habits during the fat loss phase itself instead of just like calorie deficit. Just suffer through this hunger now and I'll be good. Focus on your habits, things that you're actually going to continue doing. And so you won't even have to think about those things. They'll be second nature. That's kind of a separate tangent. But focus on those things. And I'm kind of losing my train of thought here. Oh, and understand that, like, you might feel what I'm describing right now. You might experience this. It might feel kind of like, damn, I'm not really getting that dopamine anymore. And it's kind of like, fuck, I should turn to food and get dopamine from that, right? No, you shouldn't. those kinds of pleasures are never worth it, my friend. You'll realize that the hard way. So that shit's not worth it. But a good thing you can do here practically, what I was trying to get at, is besides just doing a proper deficit, is set new goals. Specifically, training goals, because that is one of the main things that you can really do here, because we're not going to push weight gain on the scale. We're not stupid. We're not bulking really quickly, anything like that. We're not idiots. You probably wouldn't be watching this if you are a part of that camp. Maybe you are, which I'm happy to explain why that's stupid. But that's not to say I'm not even going down that the whole debate. That's not the point. The point is though that regardless, even if you were doing a bulk, the rate of weight gain would be very slow, probably much slower than your rate of fat loss. And so you're not really getting that feedback, that instant gratification. You don't really have that goal to chase. But you do have your training, which is what it should be. That should be your focus anyways. And so make it a point to focus on just getting strong as shit. I'm sure during your cut, especially during the last few weeks, your training probably sucked. You probably hated it. You're probably dreading your workouts because you feel like shit. You're probably low on energy, low on carbs. You're feeling flat. You're not really getting good pumps, etc., etc. Use all this new food, all these new carbs that are going to hopefully fill you up and get you feeling better, which is another thing that I want to go down in a second. Hold on. But use all that shit to your advantage. Get super strong. Get jacked. Have great training. Enjoy your training again. Fucking get motivated about it. Set goals. Set performance goals. Set whatever you want. Just get super strong. Set new goals is the main idea there. Have a new sense of purpose about you. Hopefully you have a life outside of the gym as well. And so this won't be such a huge thing. But I would definitely recommend that. And that brings me to another point, is that kind of similar to what I was saying before about how people won't really let themselves see what they could look like. Is a lot of the times when you're really deep in a deficit like that, you'll actually start to feel like you look worse because you're super flat and depleted. And a lot of the times people will let this get to their head and they'll end up stopping the cut because they feel like they're getting skinny now, they're losing muscle, which if you're maintaining your strength, which you should be, then you're fine there. Don't have to worry about that. But the point is, let yourself get those carbs back in your system and fill back up again. This might take a week, maybe longer, for you to really start to see okay, I'm not actually that scrawny. You probably aren't as big as you thought you were, and you probably were fatter than you thought you were, but don't let that depleted state fuck you up and trick you. Let yourself fill back up again. Start feeling great in the gym. Start getting good pumps, looking sick. Set new goals in the gym. Get really strong. And just don't lose sight of your goals. Don't lose sight of all the hard work you just put in. Don't let all that shit be for nothing. And you're going to be fine. If you did things properly during the deficit, then you're going to be fine. Like I said, or I didn't say this, I feel like I'm not overstating this, but I also kind of am in terms of how difficult this is and how crucial it is. It is crucial, there's no denying that, but it depends. Some people will find it's extremely difficult. Some people will find it's not that difficult at all. And it's amazing. I get more food. That's it. This is awesome. If you dieted properly, then you probably will honestly experience more of the latter thing that I just said. The former, where it's you start to feel like this is super hard, is usually when you dieted too aggressively, which I keep advising against for that reason. So if you just did your deficit properly, then you're probably fine. You're still going to be vulnerable, yes, especially if it was a long cut and you're pretty lean now. You're going to be vulnerable, but it's not anything to stress about, especially if you don't really have a history of that sort of thing, of yo-yoing and poor relationship with food, anything like that. You're probably going to be just fine, and I don't want to scare you at all. I just want to make sure you don't make the same mistakes that I did, which hopefully this video helped you do that. Again, watch my other videos about specifically the recent one on yo-yo dieting, because I talk about all the things you can do to prevent this, besides all the stuff that I already talked about in this video as well. But watch my other videos as well. I have ones on everything you can imagine pretty much. But yeah, this is a topic I'm very passionate about. If you can't tell, I've made so many videos about this shit because I've fucked up. I've seen many people fuck up, and I don't want you to put all that hard work in for nothing. So, yeah, if you need personalized help and you're tired of wasting your time spinning your wheels, yo-yo dieting, you don't know what to do, whether it be with nutrition, training, with managing pain. I'm not promising anything there, but I do know a fair bit about that. Whatever it might be, and you need help, feel free to apply for coaching. Link in the bio or in the description, and in my bio on Instagram, I think in the bio of this channel maybe. You can DM me as well if you're interested. If you have questions, just DM me. Feel free to comment any questions you guys have. I'm happy to help, happy to answer questions. Nobody ever comments on these anymore, which sucks because I'm putting out a fucking 30 minutes to hour long full guide every single week on different things. And yeah, I really didn't want to record this, but I'm happy I did. That's that classic delayed gratification. Now I get to go eat my final meal and then go for a nice walk outside to end the day off. Life is good. But anyways, please support the channel. Like the video, comment, whatever, subscribe, whatever the fuck you want to do. I don't care anymore. Bye. Peace out.